Welcome to Dental Business RX. Practice success in 30 minutes or less.
Thank you for calling ABC Dental.
So you just walked up front and you notice that your financial coordinator and receptionist don't look all that happy. There's almost a thickness hanging in the air and they're avoiding looking at one another. You make a mental note, you don't want to get involved, and you go about your day. Then a couple days later, you walk into your break room and you overhear your lead assistant and treatment coordinator talking poorly about your hygienist, which quickly tails off the further you get into the room. And the following week, you notice that your two assistants don't seem to be getting along all that well today. Communication is short, and you hear a drawer or two slammed in sterilization. Office drama. We've all seen it, and it's not good for your practice, and left unchecked, it can create a toxic work environment, kill productivity, and cost you good staff. And that's what I want to talk about in this week's episode of Dental Business RX, specifically 4 steps to reducing office drama and creating a more positive, productive office environment. I'm Jeff Bloomberg, and I'm your host, and I want to start this episode off by zeroing in by what I mean by office drama. By office drama, I mean bickering, disagreements, nagging upsets, bad or unprofessional communication skills that creates problems, and so on. Essentially anything that distracts from overall office productivity, team cohesiveness, and the business of the practice. Now, what I'm not referring to are serious issues. OSHA violations, sexual harassment, discrimination, etc. Serious issues like these would be something you discuss with your employment or regular attorney, and you'd want to get them resolved fast, of course. And, just as an aside, you should have an employment attorney that you can refer to, or an HR company. It's one of these things where in the long run, I've talked about this before, it can save you a lot of money, and it also keeps you certain about what you're doing. I am not an attorney, so this would not qualify as legal advice. And if there's anything that I discuss in this episode that you figure you want to, get checked on, this is something that you would lean on that employment attorney for. All right, so now that we got that out of the way, let's look at this drama issue, because ideally you want your team getting along well at all times, or at least most of the time. It's going to enhance your productivity and it makes work a heck of a lot more fun for everybody. So let's look at what you can do to stay on top of this. So step 1 is you'd want to have some form of a procedure in place if things like this come up. There has to be a procedure, which would include who this is communicated to, by what method, email, a memo, etc. But if I'm the receptionist and I end up with some type of a heavy disagreement with the hygienist that I can't just resolve with good communication between the two of us, there has to be some method of recourse. There has to be someone I communicate to. It might be the office manager, etc. You don't want me coming up to you in the middle of the day as the office manager to complain about the hygienist. You want some methodology for me to report on this or give you information. By doing this, it actually accomplishes a couple things if you have a procedure. Number 1, it puts it in the correct place. The last thing you want me doing if I have an upset with another team member is discussing it with another team member. So I'm upset with the hygienist. Now I'm talking to the financial coordinator about it. So now I'm stirring things up with the financial coordinator. He or she may think that the hygienist is now a bad person. Also, the financial coordinator is not going to do anything about the hygienist. That's not their job. So you want me to put it in the correct place, which in most cases is going to be the office manager. So that avoids all of those complications and problems. And just as an aside, if I have a policy like that in place, right, where I'm supposed to, if I have some type of a thing or I see a policy violation or something and I have to report on it somehow, whether it's an email or a memo or whatever, and it's well known by the entire team, and instead of doing that, I go and talk to 5 other staff about it, and I know this policy, then you might have a problem with me. This is just one thing that you want to keep in mind, because then at that point, I'm not trying to resolve the situation. I'm just trying to stir up the pot with the rest of the group. So you have to have a procedure. Who do I communicate to? How do I communicate it? Where do I send it? And in some cases, it might be something that if I look at it and I go, I have to write this thing up or send an email, I might look at it and go, this is stupid. I'm just going to go talk to the hygienist and see if I can't sort things out before I take further action. But you have to have a procedure. All right. So that's the first thing that you have to have. And this is not difficult to draft. This is something you put together. Second thing is you want to create an environment where it's safe to communicate. it has to be safe for me to communicate things like this. If I see issues that I can't resolve between me and another team member, I have to be able to communicate these things. I can't be told that I was wrong for communicating them, or it can't be, I send something in to the manager and nothing happens, where there's no response or there's nothing, then I feel like there's nothing being done about it. It has to be safe to communicate. It also has to be safe, or an environment that is safe for me to be able to defend myself. Now that's important because let's say in this example I just gave you, I'm the receptionist and I complain about the hygienist, right? So I file a report and you don't do any investigation. You don't look into it. You don't talk to both sides, nothing. And the hygienist gets disciplined without any further discussion. All right, well, then that creates an unsafe environment for the hygienist at that point because they didn't get a chance to defend themselves. So it has to be an environment where it's safe to communicate and it's safe to defend yourself. And that brings us to when you have a situation like this, where there is a drama situation or some type of a violation of some kind, you need to look into it fully and get down to the facts of the matter. You might need to talk to both people. You may need to look into some things. There are things that can create conflict that just doesn't seem to go away that we talk about on the MGE program. We actually have it in a couple of our courses, which I'm not going to get into in this podcast, but you don't want to let these situations just go where nothing happens or the thing is not fully investigated and you find out and get to the facts of the matter. So that's step 2. Step 3 is if a situation like this arises where you see two people not getting along or there's some kind of an upset or there's some back and forth or there's some type of a policy violation or whatever, you don't want to let it sit for any length of time. I don't know if you've ever had a patient tell you this. You probably haven't, but let's say I came to you and I need a 2-surface composite, and my answer is, well, doc, if I ignore it and don't do anything about it, it's just going to get better, right? Yeah, we know that that's not true. Dental problems don't just improve on their own. Well, situations like this don't just improve on their own. They generally tend to get worse. And you may have things like this going on that you don't even see. Or you do see them, but you just don't want to deal with it. Well, if it's being manifest in the practice like that, where you have two people bickering at the front or, treating each other rudely, that's your business. You need to do something about this. And the longer you let it sit, the worse it's going to get. And what if they're both valuable employees? You're probably going to lose one at one point unless they just happen to decide to get into communication with one another. So this is something, when you see a situation like this, you don't want it to sit because inevitably what's going to happen is it's going to flash back and cause problems down the road. Which brings us to step 4. And this is probably the most important step. Is when you're evaluating some type of a situation like this, you want to evaluate it with a couple things in mind. Number 1, what was the infraction, right? Or problem. And number 2, what is the value of the people involved to the practice? This is extremely important. Let me give you an example. So let's say you have a receptionist and a financial coordinator. All right, and they're arguing. They're not getting along. They're having problems. So the receptionist complains about the financial coordinator. He or she is mean. He or she is rude, etc. All right, so you would you actually should thoroughly investigate that situation, obviously, as we discussed. But let's say you just decide you're going to reprimand the financial coordinator. This receptionist has been with you, so let's say for 2 months, and the financial coordinator has been with you for 10 years. So you're going to reprimand the financial coordinator for being mean to the new receptionist. Well, if you don't investigate and find out what's going on, and let's say this financial coordinator is a great financial coordinator and this receptionist has only been there 2 months, you might not find out that, well, the receptionist really is slacking off and not doing their job, and the financial coordinator is having to pick up all the slack. Maybe the receptionist isn't a great fit for your practice. That's a very strong possibility, right? So you definitely want to dig into these things. And when you're, taking action, you want to look at what is the value of this person to the business. Because in certain cases, and I've seen this, I haven't talked about this in prior episodes, but I do it when I do my seminar intro. I've been in over 1,000 on site in over 1,000 different businesses across the U.S., primarily dental practices, on a consulting type basis. And I've seen all kinds of wild stuff. And I remember one particular instance where, let's say we have a dentist and he had employees A, B, and C. All right. So when I get there, we take a look at what's going on. And usually when I'm called in, it's not because things are going well. So we look at his statistics. They're not doing well. And, and this is another funny aside with managing by statistics. I'll talk about management by statistics and people will graph them, which is better than not graphing them. But the idea is that when the statistic is doing something, you're supposed to do something about it, right? Anyway, But beside the point, he'd been graphing his statistics, and we managed to sit down and reconstruct the statistics because he didn't keep individual statistics for employees A, B, and C. Now, employees A and B were gone by now, and employee C was still there. All right, A and B are gone, C is still there. His practice is crashing and burning. We reconstruct the statistics for all three. We find out that A and B's areas were actually growing before they ended up leaving the practice. C's statistics have never grown. They've actually declined sharply and lightly over time. And then the further I dig, I find out that things that C had said to this doctor about A and B were what prompted him to want to let A and B go or create a less fun environment so that A and B quit. So you're getting this. C had given the doctor rumors about A and B, which turned out to not be true, or they were greatly exaggerated, which made A and B either get fired or quit. So C was not productive. A and B were. C made the environment terrible for A and B and got the doctor on board with it. So the doctor lost employees A and B. The point I'm making with all this is if you have a non-productive personnel, right, or a problem personnel, someone who's not following policy, not doing what they're supposed to do, things of this nature, you will get situations like this. If I'm a bit of a troublemaker and I come to work for you, then I could use a line like this where I'm reporting infractions or whatever to attempt to get some of your productive personnel in trouble. So this is why you want to look at the whole scene. You don't want to just focus on one little thing. Look at the whole scene, because if I'm a troublemaker, well, then that's going to show up in my lack of productivity, which case, I mean, there's chances I could be lying, I could be exaggerating, etc. Whereas you've got this productive personnel that I'm trying to get booted out of the office. So very important that when a situation like this comes up, you dig in, you find out everything there is to find out about it to get to the facts of the matter. And the last little point I'll bring up to you, which, I said 4 points, 4 steps rather. This is sort of a bonus step. Think about this for a second. How many staff do you have? However many that might be. If you might have a large practice with 20 or 30, 40. You might have a small practice with 5. All right. Now, how many patients do you have? Chances are you have thousands. So you have a lot more patients than you have staff. A percentage of those patients could be a problem. They could be slightly toxic. And this is the type of patient who comes into your office, runs roughshod over your personnel, lowers morale, makes people not want to come to work. You know what I'm talking about. You look at the schedule tomorrow and this person's on the schedule and you think, oh, maybe I can call in, my back went out, something, so you don't have to go to work. When you end up with those types of patients in the practice and they're allowed to run roughshod over your team, if you're having a problem with them, imagine what type of a problem your team is having with them. That can lower morale. And while, so you want to protect not only your staff from bickering and backbiting and things like this, but you also want to protect your staff from patients who are actually somewhat, I guess for lack of a better word, toxic or problems. If a patient's rude or dismissive or nasty, these are not natural states of being. This is not how someone should be. Sure, everybody has a bad day once in a while. But if I come into your practice and I'm rude to your receptionist, and give her the evil eye, and then I sit down and I'm rude to your assistant, etc., and then I'm nice to the doctor because we know that happens, that is not a natural state of being. Most patients are not like that. The vast majority of patients are not like that. And you cannot let that behavior go unchecked. Patients have to be talked to about this type of stuff. So let's say you come to me, I'm rude to your receptionist, and the office manager or the doctor talks to me, and my answer is, well, look, I'm the customer. You have to do what I want. I don't care. That's just, that's how I work. Maybe your receptionist should have been nicer to me. Again, you want to get all the data here, but maybe I'm the type of patient you don't want in your practice, and you might want to look at dismissing me because, again, this is going to be a minuscule portion of your patient base, but if you allow patients like this to become problematic in your office, it will lower morale and make the work environment toxic. And there's a lot more opportunity because of just the sheer numbers for this to happen. If we said a certain percentage of people and patients fit into this mold, Well, you got a lot more patients. So you're going to have a lot more potential for that with patients. So you have to keep an eye on this. Again, what I would have here is some form of a procedure. If I'm the receptionist and a patient is being nasty and rude to me, there is something that I am supposed to do. Either I file a report, I go get the office manager. You don't want me handling this because, again, this is not my job. I'm supposed to handle, the majority of regular patients that come into the practice, not the person who's being nasty for no good reason. So there's got to be a procedure that you put in place that you're satisfied with that keeps this off the rest of the staff's plates. All right? So this was a short one, but important. So keep in mind, you're in the service business and your team is one of the most valuable aspects of this business. Protect it by creating a drama-free and positive, productive, and fun working environment. I hope this helps. If you want to find out more about MGE, you can find us online at mgeonline.com. You can also call us at 800-640-1140. And if you like this podcast and you want to hear more episodes like this, don't forget to follow us or subscribe on whatever podcast platform that you're listening to. Otherwise, folks, that's about all I have for you this week. I'll see you at the next episode.